Good evening and welcome to the City of Glendale Historic Preservation Commission meeting of January 19th, 2017. Happy New Year, everybody. May I have roll call?
Commissioner Carignati?
Present.
Commissioner Morgan?
Here.
Commissioner Shire?
Here.
Commissioner Vartanian?
Here.
And Commissioner Vidor?
Here.
Thank you, all presents.
Okay. Well, I think before we get to item number 2, I'll say item number 3. The agenda for this meeting was posted on or before Monday, January 16th, 2017, on the bulletin board outside of City Hall. And item number 2 is Commission Chair voting to determine the Commission Chair and Vice Chair for the next period. So what goes...
Here's our version of the peaceful transition of power. One day before. And unlike previous years, let's keep it peaceful.
Okay. Okay.
Oh, then it'll be so
No
boring.
arguing.
So I suppose I should ask for nominations for Commission Chair.
I would like to ask if our current chair would like to continue, and I would like to nominate you.
Oh, is this isn't like a coup or something, okay?
The reverse
Being
coup, I
very
guess.
sensitive to this.
It's like-
Okay, I will accept that responsibility.
Nice.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank
And
you.
you're welcome. And do I have a nomination for Vice Chair?
I will go ahead and nominate our current vice chair to stay on as vice chair, Commissioner Shire.
I would be happy to.
Second the nominations.
Okay.
This
I
follows
don't
the
see any
pattern we've had for a few
demonstrators,
years
so-
of kind of 2-year terms, although with the election coming up, this may change, so we don't know after April or whenever someone's appointed. There will be changes of sorts, possibly, so we'll see what happens.
If there are any demonstrations when we leave, we'll revisit it at the next meeting. How's that?
The good news is the vice chair's seat is safe at this point, so.
As long as I behave.
Okay. Thank you very much, everyone, and let us go on to the approval of the minutes from December 1st. Does anybody have any additions or corrections to the minutes from the last meeting?
None.
No.
No? Okay. Motion to approve the minutes from December.
So moved.
Second.
I'll second.
Roll call.
Commissioner Carignati?
Aye.
Commissioner Vartanian?
Yes.
Commissioner Morgan?
Yes.
Commissioner Shire?
Yes.
Madam Chair Vidor?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes to approve the minutes.
Okay, and the next item on the agenda is oral communications, and I have one card from Catherine Jerka.
Good evening, everyone. I heard you all abuzz with, excuse me, the news that I wanted to address in the oral communications, and that's the new state law that requires local governments to allow the creation of accessory dwelling units in single-family residential neighborhoods without design review or public comment. I understand that Glendale is in the process of creating an ordinance, and that it's going to be dealt with as an urgency ordinance, perhaps January 31st, but possibly after that. I've done a fair amount of research on this law and the possibilities for implementing it. It's amazing how few people know about it. I was the one to inform the California Preservation Foundation that this law had gone into effect when I called to try to see if they had any insights about what it meant for historic resources. They are planning a webinar, but they will have to gather more information before they do that. At the state Housing and Community Development Department put out a memorandum as a guide to local governments for how to implement the law. You can get the link to it from planning staff, and I really suggest that you review it. It's not terribly long and will give you some sense of what the possibilities are. It seems to me clear from that document that local governments can create reasonable standards to guide the ministerial process of approval. These standards can't be so onerous as to make it impossible or even difficult to build ADUs throughout the city. But they can create standards including minimum and maximum unit sizes, minimum setbacks, maximum amount of coverage on a lot, and then landscaping and architectural design to deal with issues of compatibility. And some of that is language actually from the memo. And we really hope that Glendale will make use of these provisions to try to mitigate the impact on Glendale's neighborhoods. No one will doubt that affordable housing is a serious issue throughout Southern California, but of course the Historical Society is concerned about the impact on historic resources, historic districts, and potential historic districts, because there are a number of them out there. Pasadena they had an ordinance that went to the Planning Commission, and has their Planning Commission, based on the staff recommendation and recommendation from their city attorney's office, is asking the city council to vote on provisions in their second dwelling unit ordinance that include a 15,000 minimum square foot minimum for lot size, 800 square foot maximum for unit size. Also, no ADUs in hillside areas or historic districts. And when they say no ADUs, that only means new construction ADUs. ADUs that are within the existing footprint of the house or the existing footprint of an accessory structure on the property, those can be allowed, from what I understand, pretty much anywhere, that those can't be prohibited. And of course, Glendale will need to tailor its standards to its community. 15,000 square feet would be an awfully large lot size minimum here, but I think it has to do something. I think we all can agree that the character of Glendale would be, of the neighborhoods would be diminished quite a bit if mobile homes started popping up in front yards, which if Glendale does not just accepts the ordinance from California, that would be entirely possible. So I leave you with that that cheery thought, and I just urge you, when the ordinance comes before City Council, to familiarize yourself with it and weigh in if there are things that you think could be strengthened, but still meet the requirements of the state law. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very informative.
I'd like to ask Mr. Platt if it would be appropriate to agendize this for an update that's tailor-made for people who are reviewing things like what we're concerned with.
Sure.
At some
Well,
point.
agenda, is it just by way of, everyone's been caught a bit off guard by this,
Yeah,
so we
sure.
have a listserv for all of the CLGs that I'm part of, and one of my colleagues in Ventura, I think he's a commissioner in Ventura, sent out a message like, "Wow, what's going on?" And he was very, very much, we don't disagree with the idea that we need to bring more affordable housing into the world, and we want to be able to do it even in our historic properties, and sent a fairly long email, and no one responded, even some of the people who are very much on this listserv regularly. And then he sent out another message, Bueller. Bueller. And I think that was a sign that, cities are scrambling right now trying to figure this out. I just got the dates, some of which Kathy mentioned just this afternoon, and we've talked about it a little bit. We're definitely in Glendale looking at our historic resources, finding ways. The trick is the definition of ministerial approval versus discretionary approval. Design review is typically considered to be discretionary. Laura Stotler and some of our colleagues were working with Building and Safety, Fire, City Attorney's Office. We're looking at ways that we can look at these projects without it being a discretionary approval process. One piece of good news maybe is the same thing that applies to the statewide solar law, which also prohibits design review for solar installations. Mills Act properties are not subject to that law. They're, as far as I know, the only situation in the state that isn't. I'm not a lawyer, and we just brought this up today, so it hasn't been vetted, but there's the possibility that that will apply. So we, at least for our Glendale Register properties on the Mills Act or future contributing buildings on the register, or in the districts, we may have discretion. We may not be able to say no, and I'm not sure that we even want to. Like I said, it's not a bad concept, but there we might be able to do more full design review, more traditional design review. So in terms of dates, and I know this isn't agendized, but I think it's fair, as Kathy mentioned, the first date that we think we have is January 31st at City Council, which will be to, it's an urgency ordinance. And that would be the first step is to introduce the ordinance. There's the chance that if that date holds, then February 7th would be the adoption of the urgency ordinance. Urgency ordinances, by definition, have a short time span, so it's 45 days, and there's a possible 90-day extension. There'll be public comment at that hearing, so anyone, commissioners or members of the public, can testify at City Council. As of now, this also looks like it will go to the Planning Commission, and so HPC members and the public could testify at Planning Commission, and that tentative date is March 1st. So since we're not going to have another meeting for a month, these dates may change, so people will have to keep their networks informed. But
Well,
so,
since
yeah,
we're-
we definitely recognize the issue. The city's goal is to not allow mobile homes to be planted in front of any house, is my guess, but let's say in districts or Glendale Register properties for our purposes.
Well, I know we're probably not supposed to get into an exchange now on the topic if it isn't agendized.
Yeah, I'd
but
like to agendize it.
could we agendize it for February?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay,
Mhm.
great.
May I ask a
So-
question?
All right.
May I ask a question real quick?
Yeah.
The link that Ms. Yerka mentioned, is that something that you're aware of and can pass on to us?
I haven't seen it, so.
Okay. You what?
I can email it to you.
That would be great. Thank you.
Comments from commissioners?
I just have one more quick question. Jay, did you say it would, if the urgency ordinance
Yeah.
is potentially adopted on February 7th, it would go to Planning Commission in March? Like
Yeah,
after
for
council?
discussion of the process, there will be a final ordinance, so the urgency ordinance is just to get something on the books right now, so we can
Okay.
start dealing with it. It's not gonna be the final document, it's gonna be a work in progress. So whatever happens toward the end is gonna be a result partially of all the input that the city gets from the community. And then as we learn more about the legal ramifications, what we can do, what we can't do, so it'll
Nothing
its way
goes
through the
that
process.
fast,
And
right?
I'm sorry, did you say the urgency ordinance is only good for 90?
It's for 45
45
days,
days.
and then it can be extended, I believe, for 90 days, and I'm not sure if there's another extension. I don't think so.
So you need to have the final ready for voting after that 45 or 90 days. Is that the intent?
I don't want to say that because I don't know the details. It seems like that, but
Yeah.
but there may be other ways to extend these things. I think this is a huge kind of legal issue, and then we have all the other kind of governmental aspects of it. So I can't imagine, things like this in 3 months, 4 months.
Nothing goes that fast. right?
Sometimes not. So.
Okay.
Thank you.
But
Thank you very much.
But we're not alone. Every city's dealing with it, and all of the historic preservation people are aware now, asking about it, but still not offering answers to the CLG listserv question because we don't know. So.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Okay, comments from commissioners. Anybody?
I had one, I just wanted, talking about agendized topics, and then the new business 8A reminded me of the year in review. I think one of our agendized topics to bring forward was going to be those properties that have been added to the register and if their plaques had been completed and installed.
Oh,
Could
right.
we get
okay.
status of that in the next, month or two, or
Yeah.
put it on the agenda?
And for Christina was handling the plaques, she moved on to a job with the City of Los Angeles. But I have a list of people who still need plaques, and I think I have a more or less updated list of that. So I'll do my best to pull that together, and then we have some feelers out for someone to replace Christina. So hopefully by next meeting, possibly we'll have someone.
Good, thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to follow up on the Adams Square gas station, which was mentioned last time, the leaking problem. And it's still leaking away. Unfortunately, the art exhibit the new art exhibit is in, and fortunately the leaking is along the sides of the building, and this is hanging in the middle. But there are some problems, and I think I sent you and
Yeah.
Parks Department a photograph of the corrosion that's
Some
forming as a
rusty
result of
water, yeah.
that. So I just wanted to make you aware of the fact.
Yeah, I'm
that
very
the
aware of it.
problem isn't
I've been to, I
resolved
was
yet.
there on a rainy day, but it was relatively light rain, so I didn't see any obvious leaks.
Yeah.
The building is designed to have this open roof system, and then there are these internal trays that the water comes, if the water comes over the edge, it's supposed to be directed in these trays. It all collects in one point, and then there's a big drain pipe that comes down. I think what might have been happening is if there was a lot of wind, the trays were either overflowing because there's clogged up for some reason, or if there was a lot of wind, maybe some water was splashing over, or there was so much rain coming down it couldn't handle it. I don't know, but the
Bad
system is
timing.
designed this way. It's a very strange system. Preservation-wise, I believe we can make modifications to that system without affecting the historic character of the gas station, and the internal ceiling system would look exactly the same if they're doing all the work on the top deck. So Onig Bulanakian from Parks has been involved, and his team knows about it. I haven't gotten an update on what their planning is, but stay on, keep in touch, and
Okay.
But the city's definitely looking at it.
Great. Thank you.
Mhm.
I'm just going to take a moment to thank, if I may,
Yes.
Ms. Yurka, for all of the work you've done on this new accessory structure bill, and in terms of getting the word out to as many, excuse me, agencies and homeowners associations and people as you can. I know it's a lot of work, and we really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so we are now on old business, and we have none. So now we're going on to 8A, HPC year in review.
Okay, just give me 2 seconds to catch up on my notes. Okay. Okay, so we did not have as many designations this year as we have in previous years, but every year what we do is we go through designations, we remember the things that we've considered, and I'll tell you what happened with them. We'll review for the public more than for you guys, because I assume you remember a lot of this. Just some of the features of the properties that were designated. This year also saw the designation of Neodrar Drive Historic District, so we have a new historic district. Looking to the future, we have strong interest right now that just has percolated up to the surface for extending the Cumberland Heights, North Cumberland Heights and Ardeven Highlands to cover the rest of the area that was identified as the Cumberland Heights District back in 2004. So I've met with some of the proponents there. They're starting to assemble the team. They may, I don't know if they've talked to any of you yet. I've recommended that with your historic district experience, you'd be good resources. And they look serious and seem like they'll be moving forward. That said, a smaller subset of that group I heard about several years ago as a potential district, and that kind of never went anywhere. Then we have 2 other potential districts. One, Casa Verdugo, we've heard is actively being worked on, but I haven't heard anything about that, so I'm assuming that's moving forward. And then we still are kind of stalled with El Miradero potential district for the long block of El Miradero with all the Spanish houses on it, which looks like a very interesting potential district. And but those are the only 3 that are actively or even inactively kind of out there that I know of. But over the next few years, that's great, because we should have some more districts coming online. In terms of the year's progress, here we are, HPC year in review, our Glendale Register resources. The City Council designated 3 houses, but HPC heard more than that this year. So I'll explain that, but here's the Kirtland, or it's designed by Ed Kirtland. It's the Barker House, so don't confuse it with the Baker House, which has a different story here, which is the mid-century modern house, very close to the Jacob Funk House. In fact, it was built on the tennis court and the rear portion of the lot of the Jacob Funk House. So we have 2 kind of back-to-back designated homes, completely different. It's kind of an interesting story that they tell as a pair. And so you see there's kind of just a deep grooviness going on here, the official term. What Christina and I learned visiting here, it's a very difficult house to photograph. There's no, just big shot that shows the whole thing, so we have to look at it in pieces. But it's very intact. A lot of the classic mid-century features, the garage door with the siding that matches the house siding, the horizontal lines, the flagstone, perforated block. Has a very nice feature at the entry, this covered walkway with the kind of waffle roof structure. Some parts are open, some parts are closed. Really helps with the classic indoor-outdoor feel of these houses. And the house from the back has a deck, which is not original, but it's pretty fantastic. So it didn't detract, I think, from your thoughts about whether the house should be designated or not. And you can see the Funk House, the orange house with the blue awnings up behind it. And a nice example of how to build when you're behind a house and not interrupt the view lines, even though we don't have view protection. Some people just decide to build that way. So this is a good visual example of that. And again, the rear patio at the bottom photo showing how this kind of floating roof system kind of helps move you from inside to outside, from full cover to partial cover to complete open to the sky. So it's a really nice example. The house was in pretty good shape, so there weren't a lot of conditions recommended. So there was just a series of wood, some areas of wood near the stairs that had deteriorated in the concrete paving. So Commission asked that that be repaired. The owners have agreed to do that. I'm sure you remember the Irving Airshoot Company, which is an exciting kind of way to kind of look at Grand Central Air Terminal, the whole Grand Central campus area, and the importance of aviation history in the city. When we didn't know anything about this building, who knew that this was kind of important in the history of parachutes and saving thousands of people's lives in world wars? It was built in 1929, pretty simple version of Art Deco, with a nice combination of brick and cast stone. And you can see in the old and current photos, very much intact. Some images of the Irvin Shoots. It started out, Mr. Irvin started his company as the Irvin Airshoot Company, but somehow that morphed into Irving. So that's where we are today with the Irving Airshoot Company. Very innovative in what they produced, and became the #1 parachute manufacturer in the world. This was just one of their outposts, and obviously it was near the airport because of the connection, but the company was headquartered in Buffalo. So here are some of the details on the building. And because there wasn't really much to do there on the outside, no conditions were imposed for the Mills Act. And here's one of the great success stories that a member of our audience had a very important role in this situation. I didn't want to say that, they're not looking. And one of our vast audiences.
Thousands of people.
So much
showed
interest
up
in
today.
preservation in Glendale, it's amazing. But the Benetti House at 3620 Angeles Avenue is one of the houses that was identified years ago in our Stonehouse survey. This was one of the better examples and then when we did the resurvey a few years ago, I can't remember, I think this even got kicked up a notch in terms of its level of eligibility. A previous owner had removed all the original wood windows and put in vinyl windows, which were discovered by our member of the public. We started discussions with that realtor saying, violation was put on the house, and he ultimately sold the house to a couple who are really into it and totally recognized that these vinyl windows were detracting from the character of the house. And when they presented this to you, this is one of the best, if not the best, example of the Mills Act. When I was talking to the new owner, I was telling him about the Mills Act. I was telling him that there is money to be saved through entering this program, and they loved the house, so they weren't going to be altering it, so they were kind of perfect candidates for this. And this is one of the best examples of where the money from the Mills Act is really going to go into the work. It's going to be fairly expensive to replace all these windows, and the commission gave them, a number of years to get the work done. But this is a great story of community input, the city, the violation system working, finding the right buyer. It doesn't always work that way. We can't guarantee that we're going to get the right buyer to come in a situation like this, but it worked out nicely. So it was built by Pio Benetti with his own hands. He was a mason. Here he is in the bottom right with his wife, Hulda? I can't remember her name now. Hulda? Yeah, that's what it is. Wow, I'm impressed by my own memory. And it's stone all over the place. It's one of the great stone houses. And here are some of the details. The commission put a number of conditions on this project along with the windows, even down to the level of the this chase that you see next to the is the mouse showing up there? The chase kind of stood out to you, and so we thought, well, we can't get rid of it. It's probably the only way to do this kind of work on a stone house, but let's just find a paint color that's going to make it disappear a little bit. So sometimes the conditions are pretty easily met. So here are the conditions that were imposed, installing the new wood windows, the rear door that we just saw in the upper left, everyone thought wasn't appropriate, correctly so. Replace that with a new panel door. There were a few damaged tiles, and then fix the appearance of the HVAC lines that we just looked at. And then this is a story that's very different, and this is, I kind of chalk this up in some ways to bad timing in terms of how these things process through the approval process. This is a house on Cumberland Road in Northwest Glendale that was the home to Art Baker. Interesting French Revival style house, but when we looked at it carefully, when staff first went out, and I think when the commission saw it, you saw, wow, a lot of alterations over the years, especially this garage at the front and kind of a big dormer addition that was put on over at the top right. I think we have a better picture of that somewhere else. The owner of the house is very enthusiastic, loves the house, and found out that Art Baker lived there. Who's Art Baker? I had no idea. Let's prove who this person was and prove their significance. And that's one of the fun things here is, you know, people digging and doing the research, and this couple did the research on their own, which is nice. The first round of their submission, I wasn't quite convinced. I asked for more research. He went back and did more research. They went to the Paley Center in Beverly Hills, the repository of all the television archives, radio archives. They tried to find more about Art Baker, and ultimately came back with information that I found conclusive enough. I was still kind of a little bit on the cusp, but the commission found Art Baker to be a significant figure in Glendale history. He is credited by the owner's documentation as one of the founders or the fathers of reality television, which takes on interesting meaning right now. And was also in film. He did the narration in 1939 of the Glendale on Parade film. He had worked at Forest Lawn as an announcer, so he definitely had these Glendale connections. He even has a star. I don't know that we have any other Glendale people with stars. And Mike, you might correct me. Any of our,
John Wayne.
well, yeah, but I mean, on our register, any of our designated properties
register.
associated with stars. So this might have been our first. Here's some shots, the before and after. You can sort of see definite changes in how this house reads from the street. And this is a shot showing the extended dormer at the back. So this dormer at the front with the peaked gable is original, and then this portion was added on in later years. So staff recommended that this, if the commission felt that it was of significance, we couldn't make the architecture finding, but we thought criterion 2 would apply. When we took this to city council, it was not long after we had been dealing with a project on South Kenwood, and it was a difficult hearing, and it was a craftsman house that was associated with the Reverend Clifford Cole, and the EIR that was done for this new housing project found that he was not significant, the house wasn't significant, and felt that the process could move forward, and there were no environmental issues. The Glendale Historical Society disagreed vehemently with that, and put me in an interesting position when it came to the time of the Art Baker house, because I had to present that the Clifford Cole house was not significant according to the documentation prepared for the EIR. And so one of our council members was like, Jay, you were just here saying that this house is not significant, which the commission, city council ultimately found to be significant and stopped the project. And so it was presented as if I was completely contradicting things,
Wish-washy.
which I could see why it looked and felt that way. The issue ultimately came down to part of the reason the council person got focused on this. Art Baker only lived in this house for 2 or 3 years, so which in preservation, you can make an argument still that there's a significant association, but the longer that association is, the better, and the more time the person was there, the more time they were in Glendale, the more time they have associated with the house. So this house was not moved forward by City Council, so the nomination dies at that point, and so all of your work, all of your thought on it, didn't go anywhere. The owner, I believe, has been making inquiries with the city attorney's office to see if there are any other possibilities, but I haven't gotten an update. So if anything changes, I'll let you know, or you may even hear about it. So that did not go as things normally go. This is the first time since I've been doing this that City Council hasn't approved a Glendale Register nomination that HPC has approved, unless anyone remembers anything that I'm wrong about, then I'm pretty sure that was the only time. Historic districts are always big for us because it's a big process. It takes years for these to get designated at this point, and we're excited that Neodror Drive was designated on May 16th, 2016, and then I can't remember which date I used. There's always the City Council hearing date, and then there's 30 days after that when the district actually goes into effect. So typically that's the date that I use, and I think the hearing was in April. Yeah, so this is the in effect date. You all know our other historic districts. We're starting to get a nice complexion of districts dotting our map. Neodrora is our 7th district, and as I mentioned, 1, 2, possibly 3 districts coming our way in the next few years. Relatively small district focused on Neodrora Drive in the Verdugo Woodlands with 32 properties. And a wonderful story that was told very well by the applicant who is in the audience. It's just such a perfect time.
Stand up so we can recognize you.
A really great by Kathy Yurka, a resident of the now district, who did a lot of research and put together a very compelling nomination, going back to the early days when this neighborhood and this area of Glendale was recognized as a very distinctive community or potential community set in nature. So the natural aspect of the Verdugo Woodlands in general has been a major focus for years, and the district today still maintains that connection, which is what's really wonderful about it. There are 2 of the early houses that go back to the development of the district still there, but we also have a very eclectic mix of houses spanning a range of decades that's bigger than any of our other historic districts. So we go from the 1910s to the 1960s in this district. What was special here, and I think the commission was particularly intrigued by this, was the connection between the natural landscape, the man-built landscape, and then the houses set within that landscape. So there are a lot of a lot of very venerable oak trees and sycamore trees in the area that were there before any of us were looking at it as a neighborhood. Once the developer started the process, there were a lot of picturesque features added using rubble stone. So we have bridges, retaining walls. There are there's one stream with 2 sides that runs parallel to Neodrora Drive, which is why it kind of meanders through the neighborhood. Unfortunately, the stream is no longer, but a lot of these features are still there. Some of these are on public property and some are on private property. As part of the designation, they're all protected. So they're specifically called out, and all of the oaks and sycamores, which are already protected by the city, but we wanted to make a special effort to recognize those trees as part of the district designation. Here's a map that was prepared by the consultant that shows the 2 waterways. So on the west side of Neodrora, we only have a couple of remnants. There was more of the stream here originally. A lot of it got built over. And then we see on the east side a lot more of the stream bed, ponds, bridges over the stream. So what's important here is even though the water's gone, we still have the stream bed as a feature, often lined with rocks. Sometimes it's channelized. All of those features are protected. We have one property that I won't discuss in any detail. It's kind of did some work that was done without permits that's been there happening for several years. Neighborhood Services team is on that. We've been reviewing it. We've been waiting for a plan from them, but the way things look, anything they propose will probably be coming to the commission. So we want to make sure this happens. Timeline, I can't say right now. So here are some of the tree features. The most picturesque thing to me is the sycamores in the middle of the road. But that's saying there's a lot of good stuff there. And then here's a representation of the eclectic mix of houses, pretty much all the styles that existed from the early 20th century into the 60s. And then here's our map of contributors. 78% of the houses were contributors. When it came down to the vote, or not the vote, the petition, where residents are asked, do you support the district or not? This district got 75% support, meaning the owners of 75% of the houses said, yes, we want the district, which is a very good number. So it was a great success story, and here's a little chart just to show where we are in terms of the number of properties in the district. So we're just under 900. If we add our Glendale Register properties, we have over 1,000 properties designated by the city. The 899 includes non-contributors also, and that's important because we do design review on those, just like we do on the contributors. And I believe, there are things that happen in districts, and illegal work happens in districts, and things don't always work perfectly, but I believe the district system is working pretty well. And you guys are the ultimate judge because you guys are out in the neighborhoods all the time. And so staff is pretty pleased, and if anyone wants to drive down Mountain Street and look at a house that many of you have asked about over time, that had illegal windows installed, and the owner has done the right thing and put in new windows, and to me it was a wonderful job. I think it looks great, and since it's not agendized, we won't talk about it, but that's, that's the ultimate goal, is to have that kind of success story. I can't promise it's always there, but we work to get it close. So here's where I have to say I'm sorry. I also, when I do these year-end roundups, I always talk about the Mills Act fulfillments that were made during the year. When I started putting this together, I went through the records, and without Christina here, I was like, help, where are the photos? I couldn't compile everything that we have to show you what was done. So I'm gonna ask for your patience, and we'll kind of have a part B of this in February. Okay, so no one's freaking out?
No.
Good. Oops, that shouldn't be there. Okay, so any thoughts or questions or anything I missed, or?
Well, I'd just like to thank everybody, all of you in the audience, as well as all of the many people.
Our audience has swelled.
Out in the,
Yes, it's doubled.
It's doubled in size. Our audience has doubled in size now, so we have a big audience, but also the people that may or may not be watching, but there's so many who have contributed to preservation, historic districting. It takes time, it takes money, it takes resources and work. And we all up here really appreciate everything everyone has done, including the people on the dais here. So, and you, Jay, you have done a lot.
Round of
too.
applause
Yeah.
for everyone.
Thank you,
A round
Jay.
of applause too for
And the staff.
everything that's happened. So, it was a good year.
Yeah, we do have, I have a stack of Glendale Register nominations that we're going to be working through in the next few months.
Great.
And when we talk about the CLG report, we have some of our goals, so we can talk about those specifically. But I wanted to let you know that this is the year that the Mills Act for contributors in historic districts begins. And, we don't really have a great mechanism to spread the word on that, and we haven't yet kind of figured out exactly how that's going to work. We did buy ourselves some time with City Council because we're dividing the year into 3 sections. We didn't want the contributing buildings to kind of overwhelm the Glendale Register, so we still wanted to make sure that every year we considered individual Glendale Register properties. So the first third of the year, so through April, we're looking at the Glendale Register properties, so I'm hoping to have all of the, I can't remember if we have can't even say, it's 4 or 5, maybe 3 or 4 nominations already in for individual properties. So I'm going to try to bring all of those to you before the end of April. Then we can move it through the city council process. And then starting in April, we can entertain properties that are contributors. The difference is going to be that contributors, applicants for contributing properties are going to have to make the case for their house in a different way. They don't just have to meet the criteria, because they don't meet the criteria. They're not necessarily Glendale Register. So the owners are going to have to prove that the money that they're going to be saving through the Mills Act is going to be applied to the house. So it's going to be a somewhat competitive process where someone who comes in and says, I need a new roof and we need to repaint, is probably going to have a better chance of getting through this than someone who says, well, my house is in pretty good condition, but I want to, clean my driveway or something. So there will be some sort of balancing act. We're going to base it on what some other cities do when they have competitive Mills Act processes. And so more on that later.
Is that something that will be kind of codified in detail, like what we've done for the Mills Act, that we have a procedure for documenting and following up on things, but there will be a different approach for the contributing structures, but it'll be better defined?
Yeah, well, there'll definitely be a work program that's part of it that's different than I guess it'll be similar to the conditions that you apply, and we may end up doing it as conditions. There may be stricter timelines. I really, it's all kind of percolating right now, and hopefully we'll, have the procedure ready so that we can get it on time. So far, I haven't gotten any calls of anyone who's interested in this, and again, I don't know how far the word has spread. When we put out our Living in a Historic District brochure, we actually have to revise the text that we already have, and it's been a goal for the last 2 years, and I apologize, we have it really close to being ready. We're going to revise it to include this information. That's going to be mailed to every property owner and every resident in our districts. So that will be the best way that I know for the city to get the word out. It's going to go to everyone's doorstep in their mailbox, and we'll see how much interest there is.
We had asked to see a draft of that if possible. Is that still doable?
A draft of
the brochure?
Oh, of course, yeah, yeah, yeah. That will definitely come to you guys.
Okay, so.
All right. So in terms of the annual report, we've gone through this before. I'm never sure what the best way to go through it is. Basically, just as introduction, every year, every certified local government is required to fill out this report that goes to the State Historic Preservation Office. The reporting period is October through the end of September, so we straddle years. It makes it hard counting how many properties did we designate during that time, but we figured it out. It's not that hard. And most of this is self-explanatory. What was fantastic this year, we've been told by State Preservation Office that our commission and staff are not getting enough training. And so we committed to them last year that we would go through the e-learning modules for the Secretary of the Interior standards, which we all did last year. And in addition to that, many of you attended full-day workshops, part-day workshops. Obviously, we haven't gotten feedback from SHPO yet, but I was impressed by the change from looking at the charts that we have in here from previous years to this year. I think the trainings were valuable, and I'm really pleased that so many of you have taken advantage of them. In fact, all of you took advantage of something, and some took advantage of more than one thing. And I just encourage you to keep that up. I think it helps you make good decisions. It helps us speak the same language, and I think it benefits the city and benefits you guys in your position. So that is one of the big changes here. Just leafing through it, I don't have anything prepared. We didn't do as much outreach, educational outreach, as we have, but Arlene Vidor helped boost our numbers by doing a lot of the presentations that she's been doing, mainly with the Historical Society, but also working with organizing the Adams Square gas station celebration. And so that's all noted here. And again, if I could remind you guys to, every time you do a training or do some sort of educational outreach where you're speaking to members of the community, I'm gonna log it and put it in here. So just send me an email and I'll keep it on my running list so that we have that, so that's important. And then the other big issue is toward the end where we talk about, what are critical issues. And the big news this year was that the City Council has approved funding and expressed the desire to do a historic resource survey for the entire South Glendale area. So that's all of the part of Glendale under the 134 freeway. There's also a little blip up Grand Boulevard that goes a little north of the freeway. It's 8,000 some properties. The survey is happening as we speak. So Historic Resources Group was retained by the city. We are working together with them, so it's pretty much just begun in terms of their actual work. But the importance right now is not just that we're going to have this, but this survey is going to tie into the environmental impact report for the South Glendale Community Plan. Because if we're doing community plan, which we talked about 2 sessions ago, I think, if we're doing a community plan that's going to talk about possibly changing zoning or encouraging development along transportation corridors, we do have historic resources along those corridors. We want to have them identified. We want to be able to tell a potential developer, or property owner who wants to make changes there, okay, this has been surveyed, it's a recent survey, it's still good. Shelf life will start evaporating immediately, but it's going to be a very useful document. And I think in terms of our ongoing issues, which is our biggest issue tends to be this kind of ongoing development, and it's not just downtown anymore. We have so many applications coming in for small apartment buildings all through South Glendale and then also other parts of the city. It seems as though every single person looking to make that kind of development has developed, goggles that only see Craftsman properties, and it's the low-hanging fruit of Glendale right now. So we definitely have issues with that. Through ongoing advocacy from the Historical Society, we have changed some of our policies in terms of when and how we're requiring developers to submit historic assessments of these properties. It doesn't mean we're always going to agree. The city is still supportive of development as a general concept right now. But I think having the survey is really going to be amazing to get this done. We expect it to be done in this calendar year. Toward fall will be final completion. And there will be public input into the survey at the draft EIR public review stage. We'll have enough of the survey completed at that point. I don't have a date at this point. Mid-year, let's say, May, June. The South Glendale Community Plan has extended now over several years with many delays. I think we're pretty on track with the consultant who's doing the EIR. So the good news is the survey schedule ties in pretty well with the EIR schedule. So we're going to have opportunity for review at the draft stage. For the EIR, the commission will also have a presentation from the consultant at the draft stage so that you can review kind of this initial draft, and then you'll also see it at the final draft. So there'll be 2 opportunities for you to review it. Then there'll also be input through the environmental review process. So that, I would say, is the biggest news that we've had. We've been talking about a citywide survey for a long time. This is pretty close because in terms of the number of properties and also the number of historic properties in the area, it's our densest collection, I would say. We also, where was I going with that? I don't know. So hopefully SHPO is pleased with this. And then, I was going to say, the next 2 community plans are going to be East Glendale and West Glendale. So that's going to be everything from the freeway north up through the woodlands to Spar Heights. Spar Heights was covered in the North Glendale Community Plan. The way it looks now, we're going to do both of those at the same time. Try to compress the process a little bit, but see how that goes. And we're hopeful, but can't guarantee at this point, that we'll also be able to do a historic resource survey to go along with that. When we did North Glendale, we didn't have money money for a survey. So again, that would be another future survey. And then if we have all three of these together, we have a citywide survey staggered by a number of years. And so we'll have some datedness issues over time, but it'll give us a great baseline of information. So I mentioned that we're pleased with all of the training you guys were able to do. And then we had goals that we established in 2014-15, and honestly, we didn't meet a lot of those goals, and it's really a staff timing issue, and I'm hopeful. I didn't add new goals this year, which I've done before. I kind of kept just the ones we didn't complete. I'm hoping and working toward completing those this year. One of the issues that was raised last year was improving the relationship with the Historical Society, largely over the kind of environmental review for the development in the city. I can't speak for the group. I think the survey is going a long way to bringing us together so that we are both agreeing that this is the way to go. And there will obviously be developers who come in, and the city is obligated to move things through the process. And it's a public process, and I think the system is working better, and hopefully we'll continue to move in that direction. So I'm telling SHPO that I think things are better than they were last year. And I think that's a fair assessment.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
On the topic of the survey, the Historical Society is collecting a database that's like augmenting the survey.
Right.
And I've put a few submissions in, but I'm not sure, you know, and maybe this is not the right time to do this because we kind of have to open up a public hearing, but I'm not sure I really understand what the purpose of this is and what the Historical Society is going to do with the data they collect and how it's
I can
going.
explain it. I think
Oh.
since we've opened up the topic through the
All right,
CLG
you want to
report,
go
I don't
for it?
have
Oh,
a problem.
great. Okay.
I don't want to speak for TGHS, but I believe I know they're doing something very similar to what City of LA did for Survey LA. In LA's case, they opened up an actual website and kind of had an outreach program asking people to share their stories, share what they know about properties. If your uncle owned a place and he was a major mover in some aspect of the city's history, tell us about it, let us know. And then the city funneled that information that they received directly into their survey database, so that when surveyors went out to a property, if someone months before had said, Uncle Joe did this or had this happen, if it felt like it was something that was potentially germane, they would put it into the database, and then when the surveyor would go out there, they would have no idea. They're just looking at a house or a commercial building. They would pop it, you know, touch the screen for this, and the information would pop up, so they would know, okay, we may have some cultural or social significance here, as well as looking at this for architectural significance. Historic Resources Group plans to do the same thing. TGHS is going to be sharing whatever information comes in through their website or however, and we're going to be feeding that to HRG. They're going to populate their database with that information, so it'll be a similar thing. And what it does is it helps us, you know, we've talked before about, you know, if you stand on the street and you look at a building, it can tell you information, and the more you learn about architecture and history, you can start learning things about a building, but ultimately they're kind of mute when it comes to what happened there, who lived there, what stories do they tell. So this is a good way for us to kind of help unmute some of the buildings if we have information. So HRG already knows about TGHS's system, and so hopefully it's all going to mesh together. I shouldn't say hopefully it will. There's no reason it wouldn't. So.
And on the list of meetings that we attended, it's fairly obvious if you look down the columns which meetings were canceled, but could you just make a little note, like, you know, so that it's obvious where somebody wasn't able to make it to the meeting versus there was no meeting?
Oh, well, this is the format we get. This is how we do it every year. If you see a column that has no checkboxes,
It's canceled.
Yeah, there was no meeting. So, and that could be because of lack of quorum or because we didn't have
Okay,
anything.
and
to
we don't
review.
have to say anything about that.
The requirement is to be a CLG, the body, HPC or whatever, has to meet 4 times a year.
Oh,
So that's the
okay.
minimum requirement.
made it.
We've never had a problem with that.
Okay.
So.
We're good.
Okay, and then in terms of ongoing goals, and I wanted your input. Now, this was already sent to SHPO because their deadline was earlier than this meeting. I noticed some cities on the listserv were saying, hey, our commission isn't meeting until after, and can we submit it then? And I didn't see that was a problem. So in the future, we might kind of ask for that extra time. Theoretically, we could start this in October of each year. It's more a matter of getting it together. So it's always, we don't get the reminders until the end of the year. Hey, your CLG reports are due. That's usually what triggers this. If you have anything to add here or comment, I can certainly revise it and send them a revised version. But in terms of our goals, we're extremely close to having our historic resource database up on the city website. It's now with IS. We have all of the not all, but because we're creating new information, but information for every city survey that's been done to date is on in our internal system, and then the new system is going to pull data from that. So the idea is that someone who goes to the city's property portal is going to enter an address. If that address has a DPR form attached to it, or we'll also have another kind of survey form, it's automatically going to come up with a red historic, and then they're going to be able to click on that, and they'll be able to pull up a DPR form for the property. So it's a very basic system. It's not a very robust database, but in terms of just getting information out to people quickly, it's going to be really effective. And so that will definitely be up this year because we were so close last year. We have yet to finalize any kind of interim design review authority for our historic districts, meaning from the time you get the nomination or possibly from the time HPC takes it under consideration. We want to have protections for changes. There'll be a lot of discussions with the city attorney's office. It kind of got bogged down, frankly, with some just staff questions and issues previously, but we definitely need to do it. So my goal is to get that moving this year. We have the resource survey we talked about, the brochure we talked about, South Glendale Community Plan. We're hopeful that that's finished this year. And then our ongoing goal of getting city-owned buildings designated. And that's where some of you come in. We're waiting for the brand park, wall, gates, and cemetery. And we're waiting for the rock walls at Dunsmore Park. And so I know whenever it happens, but those are the two that are jumping out at me. I can't remember. Did anyone else commit or suggest any others? We might have to find something for Mr. Crignati.
Well, now that there's a happy ending to the Rockhaven story, is there any reason not to go ahead with landmarking Rockhaven? It's on the National Register. I mean, asking if they would consider.
No, it's a requirement actually, but it's a requirement once the developer begins the project. Right now, the developer was chosen, is only in an exclusive negotiating agreement with the city, which is a 6-month period to put together a full-blown proposal for the city to review. That doesn't mean that the city at the end of the 6 months says, yes, we're going to move forward with that. Hopefully we do. It really depends on what comes out of the proposal. The developer commits through this process to nominate the site at the end at the completion of the project, which gets everyone kind of worried. Why not before the project starts? Believe me, we're treating Rockhaven as a very historic site under state law. It's a historic resource already because it's on the National Register. Even before it was on the register, we were still treating it as if it were locally designated on the National Register. So it's going to get the full level of historical review. I'm sure the whole project or aspects of the project will come to the commission at some point, just even if it's for public information. We just really have to wait and see. But that's part of there's a commitment on this developer's part or any future developer if it doesn't work out for them to designate. So I wouldn't push that right now.
Okay. Enough said on that. Anybody else have any, you're continuing?
I think, no, I'm done.
You're done?
Yeah.
Anyone have any questions or comments?
Well, if we had comments, do we just give them to you afterwards? Or do you want to?
You can share them now, or you can send me an email.
I can just give them to you afterwards.
Okay.
I sent you a new resume. It's up to you.
Right. That I might not update this because they already have it, but I'll put it
Oh.
in for next year.
Okay. So we're going on to the grand finale, the National Register nomination for Grand Central Air Terminal.
That's right. So I love this picture, and I'm flying to New York tomorrow on American Airlines. So I thought, well, how nice is this picture? I never noticed it was American there. As you know, Grand Central Air Terminal was rehabilitated. I think all of you have seen it. I hope we all agree that it's an amazing, amazing project. One of the best, not one of the best I've seen anywhere, and certainly one of the best I've seen in Glendale, so it's really exciting. When Walt Disney Company entered into the development agreement with the city to create the GC3 campus, Grand Central 3, which is part of the Grand Central Business Park. No, it's got a different name, but the large, many acres of those industrial buildings around the Grand Central area are all owned by Disney. Many of them are actually occupied by Disney. Some are rented out still. And all along through the development agreement, there was an agreement to restore Grand Central Air Terminal. The agreement was that it would be restored by the end of 2016 or 2015 maybe. They began in 2015, the work was completed in 2016. Disney has more than fulfilled their commitment because they went above and beyond, I believe, in what they did. Part of the city's development agreement was that Disney nominate this to the National Register. It was already on the Glendale Register, as you know. And so again, that nomination was after the work was done, then you nominate it for the National Register. Disney was already working with Historic Resources Group, who were the consultant working with Frederick Fisher on the project. So they had already done tons of research and had lots of information, so they just pretty much compiled it all, put it into a National Register format, which you guys have copies of, and submitted it to the state. So the way the National Register works is whoever files the nomination, any citizen can write a nomination. It goes to the State Historic Preservation Office in whatever state you're in. The State Historic Resources Commission reviews the nomination and then makes a recommendation to Washington. And the person who ultimately makes the decision has, I don't know if I've said, one of my favorite job titles, the keeper of the National Register. And so that person ultimately is the one who's going to sign it into being on the register. Once something goes on the National Register, it automatically gets on the California Register, so this will be a trifecta, Glendale, California, National. I don't think there's a lot of controversy with this, and it was fun seeing them do the work. It was, especially the seismic upgrade they did was insanely complicated and tricky, and they did it incredibly well. And so I was really excited to get this, but at first I thought, oh, great, it's going to the State Resources Commission. Okay, it'll get designated. I didn't know. It turns out that the CLGs are strongly encouraged, if not required, to comment on National Register nominations. Now, I did not know this before. So it's not just that we're supposed to comment. Our Historic Preservation Commission is supposed to review the nomination. If a city, for example, said, we don't want this to be designated, and because this is privately owned, it wouldn't get designated. It would be determined eligible for the National Register, but it wouldn't be on the register. In California, that's pretty much the same thing because of CEQA, but in states that don't have equivalents of CEQA, it pretty much is you're not on the National Register because the city didn't want that to happen for whatever reason. With Rockhaven's National Register nomination, because Rockhaven's a publicly owned building, they have a provision that publicly owned buildings automatically get put on the register even if the city objects. As you know, the city of Glendale objected to the Rockhaven nomination. And we didn't bring it to you. At that point, I didn't even know that we were supposed to. Had I known, I don't know that we would have, because the city was objecting, and it would have been painful to have everyone saying yes and the city deciding no. But if that ever came up again, the process would be different, and I would talk to everyone and bring it to the commission if I was allowed to, just so that we kind of do the process the way we're supposed to. In this case, though, we are asking for a vote from you, whether you recommend to the State Historic Resources Commission that they recommend to the keeper of the register that this be put on the National Register. So if you have any questions, shoot, or if you want to just take a vote, let me know.
So moved. Is that what
Well,
we
we need a motion.
I guess a
motion.
motion, right?
Motion to approve, to recommend?
To recommend, yeah, the motion would be to recommend listing of Grand Central Air Terminal on the National Register.
Okay.
So moved.
Okay.
Great, all right, one.
I second.
Okay. Roll call.
Roll call, Commissioner Morgan?
Yes. Enthusiastically, yes.
Okay, I'm glad you used that word. I'll tell you why later. Commissioner Vartanian?
Well, another enthusiastically, yes.
Oh, perfect. Commissioner Shire?
Yes.
Commissioner Cardani?
Yes.
Wow, so subdued. Chair Vidor?
Enthusiastically and emphatically, yes.
Emphatically, so, okay, cool. So I will, what we will do is send a letter to the state office saying that you have recommended approval. The city manager, as the official owner, well, actually, as the official representative of the city, will sign the letter, and that's that.
Great. It's exciting.
Okay.
Congratulations to Disney and the city of Glendale.
Yeah, no, it's a very wonderful project. Oh, I forgot to mention, but you guys all know, but just for anyone, the project won a LA Conservancy Preservation Award this year, and was cited at a nice luncheon that they do every year, and it was nice to get some Glendale attention there. So hopefully we'll have other projects in the future. get up
Seems
there.
like Glendale's doing fairly well on being recognized by the Conservancy. I don't know how others fare, but in terms of having projects that, or
Yeah,
activities
it had been a
that get
few years
recognition.
actually, but
Oh, well, there was Brand.
Right.
didn't
the library.
get recognized.
At the Conservancy?
Brand Library?
It did.
How did
There were huge, you were there, I was there, all kinds of people were there.
And it didn't get through on the first round.
It didn't
That's
get
right.
through on
That's
the first
okay,
round.
That's what stuck in my head.
Yeah.
Yes, we're doing great.
That stick in your head.
Enthusiastically.
All of a sudden, even better.
Well, now I just remembered how disappointing it was the first round, and that's the
Oh,
emotion
okay.
that must have stuck.
Yeah.
Finally
Yeah.
came through. So,
May I ask a quick
Oh.
question? On
Sure.
a completely different topic?
Well, then we
Because
may or
of-
may not be able to discuss it.
Yeah, I know. No, just because, in going through the CLG report, and I know, staffing has been short, is there any hope on the horizon that we might be getting some more staff in the historic preservation area, especially with
Yeah,
now?
Christina, yeah, no, we will definitely be having an intern come on part-time
Mm-hmm.
who will have previous work experience. I have a couple of people that we're talking to right now. Both of them have work experience in the field, and they're current students in the USC preservation program, Heritage Conservation Program. So, so I'm hopeful that that's going to work out sometime in February start date, which will be a big help. And
Because you
But-
certainly need help, no prospects for
no,
anybody
then-
more
but
senior or.
there are discussions about how workflow is going to happen within our office that could make things better. I can't say right now because I don't know. But I don't. At this time, I don't think we're going to be hiring a preservation planner, someone with that title. But it's possible in the future. Lobby your.
Well, yeah, no, I mean, we certainly like having you in that position, and I could hardly imagine anybody else, but I know
There are
that.
plenty of people out there.
I know that the department, could use some assistance,
Yeah.
so just inquiring,
Okay,
inquiring minds
that
want
it?
to know.
that's everything on the agenda. so.
okay, then.
Oh, yeah, we don't have any updates
None of
today.
any other updates, so we'll adjourn the meeting.
at 6:15.
Sign.